Hi everybody, good morning. Thank you for joining today's webinar, CX Reimagined. I can see there's still one or two more people just in the process of joining on BrightTalk. BrightTalk can be a bit tricky to sign in when you're about to join a webinar. So we'll give them another 2 minutes or so, and then we'll begin properly. Thanks. Okay, it looks like everyone's joined now, so we can begin. So once again, for those of you who've just joined, thank you for attending today's webinar, Customer Experience Reimagined for the Rise of the Feedback Economy. Today's webinar is scheduled for around 30 or so minutes, but we may run over slightly if we have a lot of questions, but more on that in a second. So today's agenda, we're going to go over a brief introduction to myself and today's host, Gary. We're going to look at a brief introduction to the company as a whole in terms of Reputation.com and also the subject matter of customer experience. Gary's then going to take over and we'll look at some key trends we're seeing within the industry, the challenges that modern CX brings to a business, as well as the solutions that we're seeing. And then we'll go over two results in particular with two of our biggest enterprise clients, one in the UK and then one in Australia and New Zealand. So just before we begin, we'll go over some BrightTalk housekeeping. So please check or adjust your audio settings. It's probably easier if you dial in. You'll see the best, you'll hear the best audio in terms of if you dial in on the phone, but you can also use your computer as well. For the best experience, we definitely recommend viewing in full screen, just so you can see all of the text on the slides. Finally, if you do have any questions, everyone on today's webinar is muted. But if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them. So please use BrightTalk's Q&A feature on the bottom of the screen. We have allocated about 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the webinar, but we'll try and answer as many of them as possible as we can. Let's put a face to our names. So I'm joined today by Gary. Gary Banks is one of our online reputation management experts at Reputation.com. He's been with the company now for around about 2 years, but he's been working within the CX space for over a decade now. So thanks for joining, Gary. My name's Chris. I work in Reputation.com's European marketing department and the host for today. But I'll now pass over to Gary, and the next time you'll hear from me will be for the questions. So once again, if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them throughout, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. But I'll pass over to Gary now.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. Appreciate showing my age there, 10 years in customer experience. Actually a little bit longer, so I've been here in customer experience space for 15 years now. And like Chris said, working with Reputation.com for over 2 years. So for those of you who don't know Reputation.com, we are a global business. We provide enterprise clients with enterprise-grade technology. And we work in lots of different sectors, typically automotive, hospitality, retail, over 70 different types of sectors that we work in. So we've got a vast experience. And as you can see on the screen there, just some of the brands that we work with, some of them personally I work with as well, helping them roll out Reputation.com and add value to their business. So really just to give you some credentials there. So moving on, I'm going to cover some trends in terms of what we're finding in the marketplace. I want to start in the old world. So I mentioned about my experience going back over 10 years. So the old world predominantly was done by survey. So survey was obviously a great way to capture feedback. We also saw indirect feedback. So that was areas like forums that used to exist and still exist. And inferred feedback, things like, maybe people email into a business. And you were doing great if you could capture all three of these and build it into an MPS or a CSAT program. But the primary goal was to ultimately create a dashboard so the business could see how you were performing. We were also wanting to see how any types of insights we could glean as well. In the old world, insights were geared around text analytics and keyword analysis. So as CX professionals, we used to get a plethora of data thrown at us, and it was our job to make sense of it. And the final part is all about closing the loop. So that's making sure that any feedback that comes into the business, mainly negative at the time, is closed. And in the old world, a lot of that was manual. What I'm seeing is that there's still a lot of brands nowadays that are still operating this type of model. So again, today is just to take you through what we're seeing in today's world and how this has changed. Before I do that, I'm just going to take you through some trends. So the first trend, I really like this. This is sourced from Google. We did some market research with Nielsen. So 93% who use mobile to research go on to complete a purchase of a product or service. And interestingly, most of them purchases happen in a physical store. So it's just to set the scene that, in this digital world, we're using the internet to do our research. We're using it to engage with companies, but ultimately, we're actually driving us into physical stores to make that transaction. The next slide, 84% trust online reviews as much as personal recommendations. So let's give an example. Let's say I wanted to take my car in for an MOT. What I might have done a few years ago is maybe ask Chris and said, any local garages that you recommend? What happens now is everybody pretty much fancies themselves as an expert, and they're going online to leave this feedback. And what we're doing as consumers is we're trusting that feedback. We're trusting that feedback as much as word of mouth. So we're looking at now these reviews, and we're taking action based on these reviews. What's really important is that 89% of these reviews are actually read on our mobile devices. So because all this feedback's being left and because people are leaving these reviews, what it's really important is that as a business, we're responding to this online feedback. The reason why it's super important is because we need to show that we care. We need to show that we're a brand that understands our customers and their needs. So it's super important to make sure that we respond in a timely fashion. And an interesting fact that I came across, which isn't on the slide, is that actually a third of the time, if you get a negative review and you respond to it in a timely manner and you can deal with that negative review, a third of the time that can actually change into a positive review. So really interesting that if you are taking the time to understand customers and respond, the outcome could actually become positive. Now, social, really important. I'd probably say 70% of people on this webinar are engaged in social in some form or another. Obviously, there's some key platforms that exist like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The thing with social is people are talking about your brand. Whether you like it or not, they're talking about your brand. They don't need to be @tagging you. They don't need to be hashtagging you. They're talking. It's important for us to understand what people are saying across all these social channels and bring it in so we can understand that feedback. And if needed be, we can respond to that feedback as well. So Google holds 92.5% of the worldwide search traffic. In the UK, we're actually seeing it's more getting towards 94%. So Google for us as a business is a huge partner. They're a key partner of ours because the majority of our journey starts within Google. And what Google are doing is they're making it frictionless and effortless for us to find the information that we need on the business. What they're doing is they're creating front doors. So Google wants to own the customer journey. They want to make sure that you get all the information that you need without having to land on a website. So whether you like it or not, your business is being represented on Google. You can now make a call, you can get directions, you can visit a website, you can take lots of actions within Google, like I said before, without even visiting a website. And a stat from Google said that 50% of consumers will not come back to your business if you're providing inaccurate data. And what I mean by that are simple things like your address details, opening hours, accurate phone number. It's really important that, as I said before, these front doors are managed effectively so the user experience is positive from the outcome. Okay, so some challenges. Let's have a look at some challenges that exist. So, as I mentioned before, there's so many channels now that exist. There's so many touch points. There's so much feedback that, as a customer experience team, we're literally being bombarded. It's coming at us left, right, and centre. So, it's really important now that we find a way that we can centralise all this. The only way to do it effectively is by using technology. I wanted to give you an idea in terms of the scale of this. So I'm going to talk about Westfield Shopping Centre, one of our clients shortly, actually owned by Centre Group. So I'll take them as an example. They're one brand. They've got 41 locations. I've rounded up to 50 just for the math. So they've got 50 locations. If each of those locations has 20 points of feedback, so that might be review sites or social sites, and let's say there's an average of 50 reviews for each of them, they're actually trying to manage over 50,000 points of feedback. So it's a huge task. And as I mentioned before, the only way to manage this and to make sense of this in this online environment is through technology. And aside from the feedback, the customer journey is also important to make sure that we're monitoring the full and entire customer journey. It's changed dramatically. So again, I'll give you an example like with Chris. Let's say if I was a car dealer, Chris may come into the dealer, he buys a car of us, and we drop him a survey. We would not then hear from Chris until maybe he comes back in 3-4 years' time to buy another car where we might get another survey. What's happening now is there's multiple touch points. For example, a customer can go and leave some feedback online before we actually physically see Chris again. So it's really important that we're capturing that, because as far as we know, Chris may have taken his car back for after sales and had a really negative experience and led that on a review site such as Google. So as a customer experience professional, we need to understand that journey. We need to make sure it's fully mapped out. So at each point where they have the ability to leave feedback or comments, we're capturing that. Okay, so I touched on the old world. And again, like I said, how a lot of customer experience models were set up, 10 years or so ago. I still believe a lot of people are still operating in the old world. And what we're trying to do is just educate that the old world now has changed. So what we see now in terms of direct feedback is not just survey. Google, Apple are putting a lot of development into things like messaging. We've seen the rise of things like WhatsApp now. People want to message. Gone are the days of emailing or, being on hold. People want real-time messaging. So it's important for us to capture that type of direct feedback. In that direct feedback has grown, so in these forums and communities are now exploding into the social environments and the review environments, the rise of TripAdvisor and Trustpilot. There's so much indirect feedback now that we need to be able to capture. And again, inferred feedback, so the rise of call centers and the fact that you can schedule appointments online. There's so many touch points that as a business we need to understand and capture. I go back to technology. you need a platform. So a platform like Reputation.com that can capture all this information and it can make sense of it. So some of the buzz terms that people have heard of are things like AI, natural language processing, machine learning. Actually, we use and we take that really serious because if you are using that technology and you're using it effectively, what you can do as a business is you can start to then create better outcomes. So, for example, dynamic dashboards. No longer just creating a static dashboard that might go out, once a month. What we can now do is create dynamic dashboards that go to the relevant people in the business with relevant information, which allows them to make better operational improvements. Prescriptive insights. So again, I mentioned before about the old days of text analytics and keywords and us trying to make sense of them. What we can now do is by using the technology I mentioned, is actually create trends and patterns and then categorize this and allows the business to make sense of all this data that exists in real time. And then we want to make sure we can close the loop effectively as well. And closing the loop now can be done automatically. We can create workflows, we can create SLAs. So let's say, for example, a negative review comes in Google, we can automatically push that into our platform, understand the review by using, say, natural language, and then in a timely fashion, maybe 24 to 48 hours, send that to the relevant person who then needs to respond. Now, this is all great, but what it does come back from a business perspective is we need a metric, okay? So all this data that exists in the wild, all these different customer touch points, from our perspective and from my perspective, NPS is not enough. NPS it still has its use. Obviously, it's geared around indirect feedback around surveys, but we now need a more dynamic and a modern metric for us as a business to understand this. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about the solution. Obviously, this is geared around Reputation.com and what we're doing for businesses. So what we do is we essentially created one platform that covers online reputation management and customer experience. We're globally the only business that provides that type of technology. And what we're doing is we're centralizing everything into one platform. Now, the amount of businesses that I see and the amount of people I talk to that are sat there with 4, 5, maybe 6 different types of technology, managing social, managing it, survey and NPS, managing review sites, to have it in one platform is, for me, it's just a resource saver and a better way for you to be able to capture this data and make sense of it. I've touched on AI before. AI, like I said, is a bit of a buzzword, but from our perspective, we've been spent years and years perfecting our AI and learning from the feedback that exists to create actionable insights. So our platform is trained on huge data sets, it's enterprise grade, and it's allowing you as a business to utilize AI to ultimately get greater insights and again, make better decisions. I mentioned before about metric and NPS. So we created the reputation score. The reputation score is, almost think of it as a credit score. So it's a metric 0 to 1,000. And what it does is it takes into consideration lots of different factors. So it'll take into consideration things like review volume, star rating, response rate, social engagement, and lots of other things that again, as a customer experience professional, we need to consider. So we give a brand a score. What we can then do is we can help them benchmark you against the industry, and we can also benchmark you against leaders in the industry as well. So it's very specific to your individual sector that you operate in. Now, the reputation score, the way it's being so widely used, is it's not just done on a brand level. So if you're a locational based business, what you can do is you can attach a reputation score to each of your locations. So you can start to benchmark now internally. One of the most important things and crucial things about the reputation score, and what we've spent years and years doing, is overlaying transactional and financial data. And what we've seen is that there's a direct correlation between your reputation score and revenue. And that's why it's so important. And that's why there's so many businesses that we're working with that are now just leading with this metric, because it's dynamic and it's taking into consideration all the factors that exist in this digital landscape. Okay, so aside from the metric, let's look at what we can also do with this feedback when it comes into a platform. So we want to listen to it, we need to act on it, and we need to analyze it. So first things first is listening. So what we create within the platform is some dashboards that are essentially making sense of this data. What you can see here is, for example, a sentiment map looking at key topics and trends that are relevant to your business. And on the right-hand side, we're actually calling out strengths and weaknesses, again, categorized around your business. So you no longer need to look at these keywords, look at the text analytics. All this information is brought to you in real-time dashboards, allowing you to make decisions effectively. And these dashboards, like I said earlier, can also then be sent to the relevant people in a timely fashion. In terms of acting on it, so I mentioned the reputation score. I mentioned that we can do it at a brand level and an individual location level. What I'm seeing over the last, I'd probably say 12 months, is the competitive insights. There's a lot of businesses now and brands that are struggling to make sense of how they're performing online against the competition. So what we can use is we can use that reputation score to benchmark you. So we can take, say, for example, a competitor's data, because it's all public available data, it's all data that exists in the wild, push it into our platform, and then we can start to benchmark you, not just at a brand level, but also at a location level. So really important, and I'd say a real key trend and challenge in the next kind of 12 to 24 months for a brand. The next thing is around, it actually says analyze there. This is actually acting on it. So once we've listened, once we've analysed it, how do we act on it? And this is all about closing the loop and taking action on the feedback. So again, if a negative review comes in from a review platform, whether it comes in from a social environment, we bring it into our platform, we automatically create an SLA, we tag it by using the AI, and we send it to the right person at the right time to answer that feedback and to close the loop. So just some results that we've seen, and I'm just going to talk about two of our clients. The first one is Mitchells and Butlers. We've got 1,700 pubs across the UK. I think there's 7 or 8 brands that they operate in. One of the challenges that they had was again centralising this feedback and having one platform to view it. The other challenge they had was they were not responding to the feedback that exists. So their star ratings is affecting the star rating, it's affecting their engagement and their acquisition. So we help them centralise the feedback and we help them respond to it. To respond to it, what we did is we actually give all the pub managers the reputation.com mobile app. So all feedback is now centralised in one place. So when they're on the move, it all comes in through to their mobile and they can respond in a timely fashion. In doing so, they now respond to 93% of all feedback. They have huge engagement from all their managers and pub managers. And now 4 out of 5 is the star average, which is incredible really for a business of that size. And I just wanted to call out Phil Urban, the CEO, who actually mentioned this solution in their annual report, and something that now they're investing heavily in, to the extent where the reputation score is now starting to outweigh NPS, and Mystery Diner is starting to decrease as well. Westfield. So Westfield are a global business. They're owned by Central Group. These guys were operating 41 different locations across 4 time zones. Again, their challenge was centralizing this. They had several systems and platforms that were trying to monitor this. They then found Reputation.com. They need to centralize all that feedback. They really wanted a metric to understand how, this feedback and customer experience was impacting the business, and they rolled out the rep score. And again, in the similar way to the way Mitchells and Butlers deploy Reputation.com, everything now is through the mobile app. All their centre managers have the information in real time. They have the information they need now to close a loop on customer feedback. And as you can see there, it's really satisfying to have this solution. We've saved a lot of resource and we're getting a lot of operational improvements out of it. Interesting, one of the founders of Centre Group, one of the CEOs of Centre Group, a guy called David, he's actually one of the founders of MPS. So it's really interesting that he now runs a business that have switched to using a reputation score as one of their key metrics. So hopefully that was useful. Like I always say, if I'm doing a talk or a presentation, if you guys can take 1, 2, or 3, nuggets out of it, then hopefully it was definitely worth your time. And I just wanted to close really just to set in terms of Reputation.com why we're unique. I mentioned it before. We're the only platform globally that combines online reputation and customer experience. For me, and with all enterprise businesses, because it's such a wide platform, it's actually we need to understand where you need help, where you've got challenges, and where the value is. But typically, it's around getting found and visibility, because again, if you're combining online reputation and customer experience, we can help drive visibility in platforms like Google. We can help you get chosen, again, having greater sentiment, and again, making sure that you're closing the loop. If you're doing all those areas in the customer journey, we call it the feedback economy, and ultimately we can deliver true value to any type of enterprise business that we're working with. So hopefully that was useful. What I'm going to pass over to Chris, just see if there's any questions from the audience.
Brilliant, thank you, Gary. So we've allocated a few minutes now at the end of the presentation for some questions. If you do have any questions, feel free to ask us some using the Ask a Question tab. We'll give 60 seconds or so for those to come in, and then we'll answer as many of them as we can do within the time frame, so we hopefully don't run over. Okay, so we've had a couple of questions come in. This one says, am I right to think that the reputation score can be benchmarked against industries, across industries, as well as between peers? So I'll pass that over to you, Gary.
Yeah, good question. So, yes, in answer to that, so the reputation score can be benchmarked across industries. Obviously, depending on which industry you're operating in, depends on the data that we collate. But again, between peers. So we have reports already set up for the platform. I'd say some of our most popular reports are helping a business look at that reputation score internally across their peers. So absolutely, I'd say I definitely would encourage any business to start looking at their peers as well.
Okay, thanks, Gary. So the next question says, how is the reputation score calculated?
Yeah, okay. So the reputation score is calculated. There's 9 there's 9 kind of metrics that sit behind the overall reputation score metric. So I touched on some of them earlier. So things like review volume, your star rating, your social engagement, how accurate your data is on sites like Google. I touched on the data accuracy before, but really important. So that's the business listings data accuracy. But yeah, so there's 9 in total. The key thing for me is it's not just about these metrics and giving you an understanding of the business. It's giving you a plan of action as well. So, for example, if we know that our response rate is low, that's an action that we need to take as a business, and we need to improve that. So we give you we give you almost a guide through these metrics and how to improve that reputation score as well.
Okay. This is probably going to be our last question now because we're conscious we've gone over the 30-minute time slot. But this question says, how does NLP differ from keyword when doing text/sentiment analytics? Yeah, great question. And I think this is probably a matter of opinion as well. For my opinion, so again, because of the businesses that I work with, I see a lot of keywords and text sentiment analytics being presented. And I think the challenge is making sense of them. So be able to categorize them, try and look at future predictions and allowing us to benchmark more effectively. Whereas essentially, natural language it's learning from all the comments and feedback. It's automatically tagging them into certain categories and allowing us to get that information in real time without having to size through keywords and text sentiment. So it's almost like I said before, it's just giving us the data a lot more effectively, a lot quicker, and letting ultimately the technology do the work for us. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Gary. So as I mentioned just before that question, that's probably it now in terms of questions. We did have another couple or so, but it's over the 30-minute time slot, and we don't want to keep you all too long. So that's the end of today's webinar. We hope you found it interesting. If you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch with the team here. You can email us at contact-uk@reputation.com, or you can give the office a call on 0800 066 4781. Hopefully we'll be in touch to answer any other questions you've got and also to elaborate on today's webinar's topic. Thank you all for joining. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.